In the early hours of December the 6th, 1963, two freight trains met in complete darkness on a quiet stretch of railway line in Derbyshire. There was no passengers, no crowded, busy platforms, but just a desolate area. And what would happen at Stanton Gate was set to become one of the worst rail freight disasters on British Railways history, and would expose deadly weaknesses in railway safety at its time. Stanton Gate, well, that's behind me, and that sits on the Erewash Valley line, and once it was a very busy freight corridor. Collieries, steel works, all manner of different kind of workings were coming through here. And by the 1950s, this line was absolutely threaded with junctions, crossovers and direct lines passing through. The first train heading south on the up line, well, that was a passing freight train coming from Leeds off towards Leicester.
And this was hauled by a Class 45 locomotive, D94 or 45114, after it was renumbered a little bit later on.
The second train was heading north. It was a steam-hauled freight, very, very long. Both trains were very, very long and heavy, and that was coming only from Towton, around about a mile down the line there, and heading to a place called Woodhouse Mill.
The steam locomotive involved was an ex-War Department Austerity Class 280, locomotive number 90313.
There's a track down here nearest to me, and that is the line that this steam-hauled freight was originally coming along. In the early 1960s, this was still a busy industrial area, with heavy freight traffic moving day and night. Signals, junctions and crossings movements all had to work perfectly, because a single mistake here could be catastrophic. Looking at this track plan of Stanton Gate South, the steam working heading north came on the down slow line just here, and the intention was to cross over the tracks all the way down to the other slow down line and continue its journey north. The southerly direction Class 45 freight train came along on the up fast line, and it didn't stop at the signals on its way and ploughed straight into the crossing train right here. Impact was deadly. The intention for the slow down steam working was to pass over from one track to another, crossing cautiously over to the one on the furthest left, over to the fourth one on the right hand side, whilst passing over both the up and down fast.
This image, looking south towards Sandyacre and Towton, it shows us the track work on the one on the right hand side still has the set of points look, so a working can head north and cross over just as the steam freight did on the night of the heavy impact. And notice there is a freight working on the up fast line, the very same line that the southerly direction Class 45 working was on. Here's an image of Stanton Gate Station, and the track right in the centre next to the right hand platform is where our doomed southerly direction Class 45 freight was coming down at around about 45 miles an hour. And this is the view in the opposite direction looking to the point of impact. I believe that's Stanton Gate North signal box on the left hand side. This again shows us looking north, with this freight train crossing from the left hand side down slow and passing over to the other down slow on the right hand side, exactly the same as what the freight train did in the night of the accident. And if we zoom into the same pitch just a little bit more, you can see the other track that the other train would have come down with a Class 45 locomotive on, and it gives you an idea of where the impact happened.
So our steam freight working north headed cautiously along the slow down line, creeping below this very bridge to approach the first set of point work to cross over the two fast lines. Whilst this was all happening, the Leeds to Leicester working was travelling at around about 40-45 miles an hour, heading south and into the danger zone. And thus was the moment of the deadly impact, whilst almost across the track, it was around about the 35th wagon, I believe, the diesel locomotive unfortunately ploughed into the side of the crisscrossing train across the fast tracks. It must have gone with such a bang. If you'd have been on this very bridge or anywhere in the vicinity, I don't think you'd avoided hearing the impact. The cause of the accident was, of course, that the train went through signals at danger, but there were other things that were taken into account, such as driver fatigue. They were working overnight, very, very long shifts. Ventilation in these diesel locomotives may have also played a part, as some of these train crews may have previously worked on steam locomotives with a heck of a lot more ventilation. There was also the automatic warning systems. It was gradually being phased in around the network, but on this section of track, it was yet to be implemented. So down there you've got the tracks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to show you the layout on maps, and also the location of the station was down there too.
Stanton Gate Station as seen off Moorbridge Lane. We've got the Arrowash Canal on the left hand side, the Class 45 working coming from the north and heading in a southerly direction. And the track view from Moorbridge Lane, the one right in the centre as the camera pans to a stop, is the one that the Class 45 working came down.
So in order to get as close as possible to the site of this unfortunate incident, I need to walk a short distance along the Arrowash Canal to get pretty much alongside. Over to my left was Stanton Gate North signal box, and this had set the signals leading up to Stanton Gate to danger, but that was not going to make a difference. The diesel locomotive went steaming through those red signals, powering towards the place of impact. It arrived at the junction at approximately 45 miles an hour. Wagons were torn apart, track was ripped up, the front end of the diesel locomotives was pretty much crushed. Both crew of the diesel locomotive sadly were believed to have died instantly. The guards on both trains, they survived. Injuries, but they both survived, and it's such a tragic loss of life away from stations and villages, pretty much in the middle of nowhere in the dark, that these two railwaymen just died doing their duties. Peering through the fence, you can see the location of where the accident pretty much happened, right beside Stanton Gate South signal box.
Miraculously, this was not the end of D94 or 45114. After the major collision at Stanton Gate, D94 was sent off for repair, and it was withdrawn in February 1987 after a main generator failure. It still hung around for a little bit longer until it was scrapped to MC Metals in Glasgow in February 1994. The official conclusion and report was that D94 was still under power and running when it passed Stanton Gate North signal box, but owing to the unfortunate death of the train crew, it could only be speculated on what the conditions were like in the cab, and what led to both men to become completely unaware that they were running into danger. However, from the position in which the controls were found, it was apparent that the driver had, at the very last moment, shut off power and made what was probably an emergency final brake application.
But within the railway industry, it strengthened the case for faster automatic warning system installation, recognising that driver fatigue was just as serious as mechanical failures, and also extra vigilance in working conditions. Today, Stanton Gate remains. It is a much quieter place than back in its heyday and like when the accident happened. I never knew anything about this accident. I lived here in Trowell, just over there. This is another section of the Arrowash Valley line, a little bit further north, around about a mile. I knew nothing of the Stanton Gate accident until about a year ago. So it just shows that a lot of railway accidents are largely forgotten, apart from maybe inside railway circles and a little bit of history here and there. But the memories of the train crew that lost their lives will live on in memories and amongst the steel and the silence. If you enjoyed this video, then thank you very much for watching. I'd love you to consider subscribing to the channel and giving it a thumbs up, and maybe even commenting below your thoughts, any recollections of this incident, and any suggestions for future visits and walks